I froze the moment I saw the tiny, perfect holes in that box, breathing holes. The afternoon light slanted through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the unmarked package in my living room. Laura's ashen face hovered at the doorway. "Don't touch it," she whispered, voice trembling. Adrenaline hammered in my chest as I realized this wasn't a harmless Father's Day gift. It was a threat. 10 minutes later, sirens wailed down Maple Street, and I knew exactly who had sent it. What began as one last effort to teach my daughter responsibility had turned into a chilling showdown that would redefine our family forever. I still remember the weight of that box in my hands, its unremarkable brown cardboard, the absence of a return address, and those neat little holes punched into the side. Each detail screamed someone had planned this carefully. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure the neighbors could hear it. "Are you serious?" Laura's voice cracked behind me. She'd been right there making coffee when the knock came. Instead of our usual smile, she'd met mine with wide, terrified eyes. "My name is Thomas Green, and until that afternoon, I thought I understood every corner of my life. 35 years of marriage, 2 children, and a comfortable retirement ahead. But the moment I dialed 911, everything I believed about my family shattered. Earlier that week, Ava, my 30-year-old daughter, had stormed through our front door with her new husband David in tow. She'd slammed her designer heels into the hardwood floor, her voice sharp as shattered glass. "Dad, you have to give me access now. I'm drowning in bills," she demanded, eyes blazing. I raised my hands, trying calm words I'd used 1,000 times before. "Ava, you'll have your inheritance when the time comes. You know our retirement depends on that money." Her lips curled in scorn. "Retirement? You're hoarding my future." David laughed behind her, that smug grin widening. "Come on, Thomas. You're sitting on a fortune." That confrontation had ended with me closing the door in their faces. I'd felt my stomach twist. I knew where this was headed, but nothing prepared me for a box that breathed. Now, parked at a safe distance, I recounted the scene to the dispatcher. Hissing noises. "Like a snake," I said, voice quivering. "I don't know who would do this to their own father." The operator's calm professionalism anchored me while I backed away. Laura cornered me in the hallway, tears trailing down her cheeks. "Our daughter. She used to be so sweet." I didn't answer. Instead, I focused on breathing throatfully, willing my limbs not to shake. Minutes later, police cruisers coasted into our driveway. Officer Ramirez stepped onto the porch badge, gleaming. "Mr. Green, is that the package?" he asked, nodding toward the living room. I led him in each step, echoing on the hardwood planks. The box sat innocently on the coffee table, the afternoon sun illuminating those tiny holes like eyes staring back at us. "Tell me what happened," he said, voice steady. I swallowed hard. "It arrived this morning. No note, no sender. And—" We heard hissing. I paused, the memory sharp. Breathing holes. Someone wanted to trap a live animal inside. He nodded, reached for latex gloves, and called for backup. As we stood vigil, Laura hovered behind me, arms wrapped around her waist. I felt more vulnerable than I had in decades of marriage. When animal control arrived, I watched through the glass panel as they carefully pried open the box. A 3-foot corn snake slithered out, tongue flicking. My breath caught in my throat. The handler secured it, confirming it was non-venomous, but that detail barely mattered. The twist of betrayal cut deeper than any fangs could. Ava had gone from demanding money to sending snakes. That afternoon in my home office, I sat before the glowing screen of our online banking portal. 30 years of transfers, bailouts, and cover-ups had built a safety net around my flawed daughter. No more. My hands hovered over the keyboard. The cursor blinked at me expectantly. With one deliberate click, I removed Ava as an authorized user on my credit card. Next, I canceled the recurring payment for her rent. Finally, I changed the PIN our shared anniversary date replaced with something she'd never guess. Each action felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. By evening, I sat at the kitchen table with Laura, soft light from the bedside lamp casting long shadows. No frantic calls, no more hissing from a box in the living room. Peace, tentative, but welcome. I sipped my coffee, feeling an unfamiliar steadiness in my chest. "You ready?" Laura asked quietly, reaching for my hand. I nodded. "Tomorrow I'll call our attorney." She squeezed gently. "This, what we've done, it's for us." I stared out the window at the suburban calm. The Hendersons were watering their lawn next door. Everything looked normal, but I knew the coming days would shift our family forever. Boundaries had been drawn in cardboard and code, and once drawn they couldn't be erased. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds as I sat at my kitchen table, the contract papers from our attorney spread before me like battle plans. Laura was already at the stove, humming a tune she used to sing when our kids were little. The sound made my chest tighten, proof that life could still carry a gentle rhythm even after last week's chaos. I cleared my throat, drawing her attention. "They've drafted the trust documents," I said, tapping the top page. "It'll funnel any inheritance directly into their education fund. Ava and David won't have access to a cent." Her spatula paused mid-flip. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yes. And the restraining order goes in this afternoon." I watched her eyes fill with the same fierce resolve I felt. She set the skillet gently on the counter. "Let's do it," she said. 2 hours later, I found myself sitting across from Margaret Summers in her mahogany-paneled office. Her gaze was calm but unsparing. "Thomas, you understand what you're asking?" she said, pen poised above the papers. I swallowed tension coiling through my shoulders. "I do." Ava crossed a line I never thought she would, I whispered. I described the box with the breathing holes, the snake, the threats. My voice caught at the memory of that coppery hiss. Margaret nodded. "I'll finalize the trust this afternoon, but the restraining order needs your signed affidavit here." She slid a sheet across an account of intimidation harassment, a direct threat to your safety. My pen felt heavy in my hand as I wrote each word, transforming personal heartbreak into legal record. When I finished, I handed it back. She smiled kindly. "We'll serve papers by tomorrow morning." Leaving her office, I realized this was the turning point. Love had led me here, but the law would keep us safe now. My heart felt both heavy and unburdened, as if I was shedding a skin grown too tight over decades. When I pulled into my driveway, I found our flower beds in mid-spring bloom, tulips dancing in the breeze. Laura greeted me at the door, relief and sorrow mingling in her eyes. She hugged me tightly. "We're doing the right thing," she murmured. I held her close, tasting the quiet before the next storm. Inside the mailbox still held that uneasy silence. No more boxes, no more calls, but I knew it wouldn't last. Ava would react, and she'd find a way to lash out. I sat at my desk and punched in her number. My finger hovered over call before I backed away. I couldn't give her another chance today. Instead, I drafted an email, a calm, measured note, letting her know I had taken legal steps. My finger hovered over send again. I deleted the draft. Some messages were better delivered in court, not over text. The afternoon sunlight was slanted gold when the doorbell rang. My heart hammered. I glanced at Laura. Her fingers trembled around a teacup. I took a deep breath and opened the door to Officer Ramirez's badge, glinting in the late light. He held a thick envelope. Mrs. and Mr. Green, I'm serving you this restraining order, he said. Laura took it with shaky hands. I nodded my thanks. He stood a moment, his gaze steady. Stay safe, he told us, then departed. We closed the door and sank onto the sofa. The envelope felt like life support, both comforting and horrifying. Laura blinked back tears. It's real now, she said. I slid my hand over hers. I know. That night I slept fitfully, dreams haunted by slithering shapes in the darkness. When I woke, I found Laura already in the living room, dressed for a morning walk. The crisp spring air beckoned. Come, she beckoned. We strolled through our neighborhood, white picket fences, children's laughter drifting from backyards, normalcy laced with tension. I kept my phone off. No calls meant peace, even if fleeting. By midday, my phone buzzed with an email notification. I opened it with trepidation. It was from ours. The subject line read, "We need to talk." My stomach churned. There was no letter, only 2 words. No apology, no straightforward plea. I showed Laura. She ran a hand through her hair, frustration flickering in her eyes. It's a trap, she said. That evening we sat down with candles flickering, a ritual we'd once shared on birthdays and anniversaries. The atmosphere was hushed, intimate, and fiercely protective. I looked at Laura, her face drawn but resolute, and I felt a fierce tenderness. Whatever comes next, I said, we face it together. 10 days later, the email came again, but this time I didn't open it. Instead, I logged into my bank account to confirm the trust was active tuition disbursements, only no other withdrawals permitted. It was a small victory, checking those restrictions in real time. I leaned back, arms spread across the chair, feeling a measure of control I hadn't known in years. That weekend we celebrated Easter quietly. I roasted a ham and Laura baked her grandmother's apple pie. The table held enough for 6, but only 2 of us sat there, hands clasped across the linen cloth. We spoke in low voices about grandchildren, how we hoped Mia and Noah would understand that this distance was protection, not punishment. When the doorbell rang later, I felt a surge of dread, but it was only our neighbor Mrs. Patel clutching homemade cookies. She smiled and slipped them into our hands without a word, a gesture of solidarity that filled my heart with gratitude. Laura waved from the porch while I closed the door. The bags of sugar and flour in the kitchen reminding me that kindness still flourished around us. That night, after the dishes were done, I stood by the window watching the last golden rays fade. I thought of Ava and David out there, furious, betrayed, and maybe even lost. I thought of my own parents, the lessons they'd taught me about love and boundaries. And I thought of Laura, whose unwavering faith had guided me back from the brink. In the hush before sleep, I whispered a vow I would protect our peace, our sanity, and our right to breathe freely, just as someone had tried to do to me that terrifying afternoon. The wind rustled the curtains, as if agreeing. Boundaries had been drawn in law, but they had been born in love, and that love would carry us through whatever came next. That afternoon, I sat in my study, the late spring light slanting across my desk, covered in legal paperwork and unopened mail. My phone vibrated on silent. I resisted the urge to glance at it. The stillness in the house felt sacred and precarious. Laura was in the garden tending her herb patch, her humming a soft counterpoint to the racing thoughts in my mind. I closed my eyes and breathed deep, steeling myself for what was to come. A sharp knock on the front door shattered the quiet. My heart leapt into my throat. I wasn't expecting anyone. Laura appeared at my side, palms pressed together as if in prayer. "He's here," she whispered. "Just you." She slipped away, and I crept to the entrance. I opened the door to see Ava standing on the porch, arms folded, her eyes flashing hurt and anger. Behind her, David leaned against their car, arms crossed, a smug, half-smile playing at the corner of his mouth. The late afternoon breeze tugged at Ava's hair, and I could see the tension in her stance, the coiled energy of someone who thought she had all the power. "Dad," she said, voice tight, "we need to talk, now." Her demand echoed the dozens of times she'd barged in before, only this time she'd rang the bell instead of barging past us. I held the door frame, feeling its rough wood beneath my fingertips. "You're not welcome here," I said quietly. Her lips trembled. "You can't do this to me." Her words spilled out in a rush. "I'm your daughter. You cut off my credit, changed the PIN, filed a restraining order, and for what? Because you think you're a victim?" I stepped back, closing the door 2 inches. "I'm protecting myself and your mother. That box with the snake, that was no prank." She stared, her jaw clenched so hard her knuckles turned white. "It was to scare you, teach you a lesson." "A lesson I learned," I replied, voice firmer now. "You crossed a line you can never uncross." David pushed off from the car. "Come on, Mark," he said, using my first name in that mocking tone of his. "You're being unreasonable." "I'm being safe," I shot back. "Safe for us." Ava's eyes flicked to the street as if expecting a camera crew. "You think you can just lock me out of my own life?" I let the words hang between us, heavy as iron. Then I moved aside. "Please leave the porch." She hesitated a moment, long enough for me to see her hurt flicker into fury, then stomped backward off the threshold. David followed, hands shoved deep in his pockets. As they trudged to the car, Ava spun and called over her shoulder, "You'll regret this." The car roared away, rubber kissing asphalt in a squeal. Dust drifted in the air where they'd parked. I closed the door and slid the deadbolt home. My hand shook, but I didn't collapse. I stood there in silence, steeling myself for the fallout I knew was coming. That evening I sat with Laura on the back patio. The sky glowed peach and lavender as the sun dipped behind the trees. We drank iced tea in comfortable silence, listening to the crickets chirp up from the lawn. "She's angry," Laura said softly. "She has every right to be," I answered. "But she's not safe for us." She took my hand. "I know. Still, it's hard." I nodded. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done, turning my back on my own daughter." A sudden rustle in the bushes made me start. I stood and peered into the shadows, just the neighbor's cat prowling the flower bed. I laughed nervously and sat back down. Even that startled me. The next day I found 2 envelopes in the mailbox. One was a letter from our financial institution confirming the trust's activation. The other was thick and unmarked, like the first box, a warning rather than a gift. My stomach clenched as I carried them inside. Laura met me in the foyer. "Open the bank one," only she instructed. I sliced open the official envelope first. Everything was in order. Trust established educational distributions only irrevocable by Ava or David. Relief washed over me, mingled with sorrow. Then I lifted the second envelope, plain, ominous, and slit its edge. Inside was a single photograph, the two of us at my retirement party smiling broadly in front of the crowd. Beneath it was scrawled in red ink, "Smile while you can." My blood ran cold. I folded the photo and swallowed past a lump in my throat. Laura slipped an arm around me. "Call the police," she said. I nodded, dialing 911 with steady fingers for the second time in as many weeks. As I described the intimidation, I realized what this meant. Ava wasn't going to back down. She was escalating. The officer who arrived young and solemn took my statement and promised patrol checks in our neighborhood. I watched him leave his cruiser, pulling away in a waltz of red and blue. I closed my eyes and exhaled. The legal shield we'd erected was in place, but I could feel her testing it already. That night's sleep eluded me. I lay awake listening to the wind rustle through the eaves, my mind replaying every heated word, every broken promise. I thought of Mia and Noah, my grandchildren, innocent in this war. I thought of the day they'd made me a Father's Day card, crayon scrawls proclaiming "World's Best Papa." That memory ached like an open wound. At dawn, I made coffee and slid into my favorite armchair with a mug in hand. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I stared out the window at the dewy lawn, thoughts swirling. I knew what needed to come next. Clear final steps that no photograph, no slithering creature, no legal maneuver could deter. I opened my laptop and drafted a letter, a formal notification to Ava that any further contact, including threats, surveillance, or messages, would be met with criminal charges. I attached the photo as evidence. I paused, finger hovering over send. Laura watched from the doorway. She nodded silently. I exhaled and clicked. As I closed the laptop, I felt a strange calm settle in my chest. The world outside was waking up, birds, singing, neighbors, walking dogs, mail trucks rumbling down the street. Inside, I'd drawn lines in the sand. I had protected my home, my marriage, my peace. Later that morning, I found a voicemail from Ava. Her voice was raw, hurt, disbelief, anger all tangled into one. "You're destroying everything we had. You'll regret this. You'll be alone." I listened twice, then deleted it. No reply. No tearful pleas to negotiate. Just the sound of her footsteps echoing in my memory. That afternoon I sat with Laura on the porch swing, the phone silent beside me. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "We're going to be okay." I closed my eyes, feeling the swing rock gently under us. "Yes," I whispered, "we are." In the distance, a child's laughter drifted from a neighbor's yard. The sound was fragile and beautiful, a reminder that life carries on even after the storm. And for the first time since that box arrived, I believed we'd weather this one too. That evening, after the sun slipped behind the horizon, I found myself wandering through the living room, footsteps echoing against the hardwood floors. The silence felt both peaceful and hollow. Peaceful because the restraining order and trust agreements were in place. Hollow because they had driven a wedge between me and Ava that might never heal. Laura watched me from the kitchen doorway, her concern reflected in the soft glow of the overhead light. "Dinner's almost ready," she said, gently breaking the hush. I offered her a small, tired smile. "I'm coming." As I joined her at the table, the aroma of roasted chicken and sage filled the air. Our home, once filled with laughter and the scent of fresh-baked cookies, now carried the faint tension of unspoken grief. Still, we sat down together, plates in hand, determined to reclaim a fragment of normalcy. We ate in companionable silence for a few bites, me focusing on the savory flavor of the chicken, Laura savoring the crisp edges of the potatoes. Then she set her fork down, eyes bright with an unspoken question. "Do you think she'll try again?" My throat tightened. I remembered the photograph in that envelope, the red ink threat penned with chilling clarity. "I don't know," I admitted. "But if she does, we're ready." I could see the life in Laura's eyes flicker with worry, but she nodded. "We'll face it together." As we cleared the dishes, a notification pinged on my phone. I glanced at it, an email from our neighbor Dave checking in after hearing about the restraining order. He offered to keep an eye out for anything suspicious. I felt a swell of gratitude, small alliances knitting around us. I texted back a quick thank you, then slipped the phone into my pocket. Later that night, unable to sleep, I settled into my study with a paperback novel, something light to distract my mind. I read a few pages, but the words blurred. The ticking of the grandfather clock down the hall measured time in slow, heavy beats. My thoughts drifted to memories of Ava as a child, her first steps across this very room, her laughter echoing against these walls. I closed the book and rested my chin on my folded hands, eyes closing against the ache in my chest. A soft knock jolted me upright. I wasn't expecting anyone. My pulse quickened until I recognized Laura's silhouette at the door. "I can't sleep either," she whispered as I opened the door. "Mind if I join you?" I gestured to the chair beside my desk. She sat smoothing her nightgown. For a long moment we listened to the quiet two souls tethered by love and worry. "How long do you think before we see the kids again?" she asked, voice low. My heart ached at her mention of Mia and Noah. I hesitated, searching for honesty. "I hope soon, but only if they're safe. I can't risk another snake or another threat." She nodded, biting her lip. "I know, but I miss them." I reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Me too." The week that followed played out in a tense routine. I checked our locks each morning, spoke briefly with Officer Ramirez when he dropped by for a welfare check, and spent afternoons going through old photo albums with Laura. We laughed through tears as we recounted our vacation at the lake, or the school concerts where Ava sang off-key but with boundless joy. Those memories were bittersweet, a reminder of what we'd lost and why we fought to protect our peace. One rainy afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Margaret Summers. The restraining order had been officially granted, and any violation would be grounds for immediate arrest. Relief washed over me. I texted Laura, "It's done." She replied with a heart emoji and the words, "We did it." That same evening, as we sat by the fireplace with mugs of cocoa, the front doorbell rang. My stomach tightened at the unexpected chime. I set my mug down, exchanged a tense glance with Laura, and rose to answer. Through the rain-splattered glass, I saw Officer Ramirez standing with a determined expression. He held a folder in one hand and an umbrella in the other. I opened the door. "Evening, Mr. Green," he said. "I'm here to confirm again that you and your wife are aware of the order's terms." I stepped aside to let him in. "We're fully briefed. Thank you for coming." He opened the folder. "We've had reports of a vehicle parked on your block matching the description of yours." My chest tightened. "That's our neighbor, Mr. Patel. He borrows our car when his is in the shop." Officer Ramirez studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I'll follow up with him to be sure." He closed the folder and looked at me kindly. "If you see anything else, any sign of surveillance, any odd behavior, call us immediately." "I will. I promised." He gave me a curt nod, then left into the rain. As the door clicked shut, Laura exhaled in relief. I felt the tension drain from my shoulders. "We're not alone," she said softly. "No," I agreed. "We're not." A week later, on a bright Saturday morning, Laura suggested we walk to the park, where Ava used to push the kids on the swings. I hesitated too many memories, but she slipped her hand into mine, and together we stepped into the crisp air. The park was alive with families, children squealing, dogs running, parents chatting on benches. I felt both longing and distance. We found an empty swing set at the far end and sat side by side. I closed my eyes and pictured Ava's face lit with surprise when I pushed her on that very swing during her 10th birthday. She laughed so hard her ponytail whipped behind her. I opened my eyes, meeting Laura's gaze. "Maybe we should send a message to her," I said quietly. "Tell her we'd like to see the kids when she's ready and safe." Laura considered this. "Could work. It shows we're open to healing." I nodded. "I'll draft something. No anger, just love." Back home, I wrote a short, gentle letter. "Ava, if you ever feel ready to talk, we'd love to see Mia and Noah. No conditions, just time and a safe space. Love, Dad and Mom." I folded it and set it on the coffee table. That evening we sat together in the living room, the letter between us like a small olive branch. Outside, the wind rattled the windows as if testing our resolve. "Tomorrow," I said, closing my eyes against the storm's howl, "tomorrow I'll mail it." Laura leaned her head on my shoulder. "Whatever happens, we'll face it the right way." In the quiet that followed, I felt a cautious hope. We had built walls around our home, yes, but we had not walled off our hearts. The path to reconciliation might be long and fraught, but tonight, in the company of the woman I loved, I believed it was still possible. And as rain pattered the roof, I held that fragile hope like a lifeline, knowing that the greatest victories sometimes begin with a single trembling letter. Early the next morning, I slipped out of bed and carried the letter folded neatly in its envelope into the kitchen. Laura was at the counter pouring coffee. The steam curled around her face, softening the worry lines that had taken shape over these last agonizing weeks. I set the letter beside her plate and rested a hand on her shoulder. "I mailed it," I said softly. She turned, offering me a small, hopeful smile. "One step," she whispered. Out the door I went, the cool breeze tugging at my collar as I walked to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. My heart thudded in my chest so loudly I was sure the postman would hear it. I dropped the envelope into the slot with deliberate calm, then straightened, feeling the weight of every word I'd written. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was extending an olive branch. No demands, no ultimatums, just an open door. Back inside, I found Laura staring out the window, arms wrapped around her waist. I slid in beside her. "It's out of our hands now," I said. She leaned into me. "Now we wait." The next 2 days passed in surreal slow motion. I kept watch for Mrs. Patel's car in the driveway in the afternoons, hopeful for any sign of Ava's car, too. The morning news filtered through the speaker's stories about local events, a mild trial downtown, but none of it penetrated the bubble encasing our home. Each ring of the phone sent a jolt through me, but every caller was a wrong number or a friend checking in. No word from my daughter. On the third evening, as twilight turned the sky a dusky rose, I sat in my study going through old family albums. Laura joined me, pointing out a photo of our first camping trip. Ava's grin stretched ear to ear as she held up a marshmallow on a stick. I traced the edges of that image with a fingertip tasting nostalgia and regret. "She was so fearless then," Laura murmured. I nodded, closing the album. "I miss her." Before either of us could say more, the phone rang. My hand froze over the receiver. Laura's eyes locked onto mine, anticipation and dread swirling together. I lifted the receiver. "Hello?" Ava's voice crackled through raw and hesitant. "Dad." I swallowed, heart pounding. "Ava." Silence settled like a weight. I fought the urge to demand she apologize. Instead, I said, "I got your letter. I sent mine too." There was a quiet inhale, then "I've been thinking." My breath caught. "I'm here." Her voice wavered. "I want to see Mia." Tears pricked my eyes. "Of course." "Not at your house?" she said sharply. "At the park, Sunday at noon." I glanced at Laura, who gave me an encouraging nod. I cleared my throat. "That works. I'll be there." "Okay. Just me and the kids. No David." My chest tightened at the mention of David. "Understood. I'll text you the playground location." "Thank you," I said. The line went dead before I could say more. I sank into my chair, shaking with relief and nerves. Laura slid next to me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "They want to meet," she whispered. I let myself exhale. They do. Saturday night sleep came fitfully. Dreams populated by half-remembered laughter and the hiss of a snake. Morning light found me pacing the living room, rehearsing what to say. Laura handed me a cup of coffee and a small stack of tissues. "You're going to be okay," she said, voice gentle. Sunday dawned bright and crystalline. I dressed in my best khakis and a button-down shirt and felt oddly exposed. As I drove to the park, my palms were slick on the steering wheel. Birds chirped from the treetops as I approached the playground, a cluster of slides and swings bathed in morning sun. I spotted Ava first, her silhouette framed by the swing's hair pulled back, shoulders tense. Next to her, Mia and Noah clutched her hand, eyes wide at the sight of grandparents they hadn't hugged in weeks. I parked a few feet away and approached slowly. Ava turned as I walked up. The moment our eyes met, I felt an electric shock of both hope and regret. "Dad?" she said, voice low. I lifted my hand in a small wave. "Ava." She nodded once tightly. I knelt so I was level with the children. "Hey, you too?" I said, voice soft. Mia ran ahead, arms spread wide. She flung herself into my arms. Noah hesitated, but then joined the hug. Their warmth washed away every ounce of fear. I hugged them back, breathing in the sweet scent of sunscreen and spring air. "I've missed you," I whispered. They giggled, squirming free to dart toward the swings. I stood and brushed a tear from my cheek. Ava watched us, arms folded. I turned to her. "Thank you for bringing them." Her jaw clenched. "I want to trust you again." My heart pounded. "I want that too." She exhaled, tension flooding her posture. "That box. I shouldn't have done it. I was angry, and I thought I could scare you into giving in." Anger flared in my chest, quickly replaced by sorrow. "You scared me more than anything in my life." Her eyes glistened with tears. "I'm sorry. I let everyone else talk me into it. I didn't know how to ask for help without threats. I closed the distance between us, careful but deliberate. I love you, Ava. That's why I had to protect our family." Her shoulders shook. She took a shaky breath. I was desperate. But it was wrong. I placed a hand on her arm. "You're my daughter. I'll always love you. But we have to rebuild trust." She nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks. "I understand." I let her hug me next. She rested her head on my shoulder, and for a long moment we stood there, two people mending a broken bond. When we separated, Noah ran up, clutching a handmade card. "Grandpa, I made this," he announced proudly. I took the card, crayon daisies, dancing across the front, and felt my heart swell. "Thank you." He grinned, then returned to the swings. Mia waved before chasing after him. Ava watched them go, a soft smile tugging at her lips. We sat on a nearby bench as the children played. A breeze rustled the leaves overhead. I looked at Ava, her posture more relaxed than I'd seen in weeks. "Coffee after this?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. Let's talk." I offered her my arm, and together we walked toward the park's exit, hand in hand, and past the swings where laughter rang out like a promise. The path ahead was uncertain, but in that moment, as the sun warmed our backs and the cicadas began their afternoon song, I dared to believe we'd find our way back to each other step by deliberate step. The next morning, sunlight slanted through my kitchen window as I sipped lukewarm coffee and reviewed the park meeting in my mind. Ava had slept in their guest room, and though we'd planned to talk over pancakes, she slipped downstairs in silence. I poured fresh coffee for both of us and set 2 mugs on the table. She slid into the chair opposite me, tucking her hair behind one ear. Her eyes, still puffy from yesterday's tears, met mine with an awkward half-smile. "Thanks for doing this, Dad," she said quietly. My heart tightened. "I'm glad you came." I stirred sugar into my coffee. "How are you holding up?" Ava stared at her mug, tracing the steam with her gaze. "I realize I almost lost everything, my home, my kids, my relationship with you and Mom, all because I was too proud to ask." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I've been running on my own rules for so long I forgot how to ask for help." I reached across the table, covering her hand with my own. The warmth of her skin reminded me of her as a child clutching my fingers at bedtime. "You don't have to run alone anymore." She swallowed hard. "I want to make things right. I already asked Margaret to help me get finances in order, no more emergencies, just a budget." I nodded, pride and relief coursing through me. "That's a good start." I paused, letting the words settle. "What about David?" Her gaze flickered with unease. "He's resistant." The word hung between us, heavy with implications. "He thinks I'm weak for asking you instead of letting him handle it." My jaw clenched. "I never meant to undermine your marriage." Ava's hand tightened around mine. "I know." She pulled a deep breath. "But I need you now more than ever this time, not as my ATM, but as my father." A soft knock at the back door made both of us start. I rose and opened it to find Laura standing on the patio sun hat, in hand, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Good morning," she said, stepping inside. "I brought breakfast." Warm aroma of blueberry muffins wafted in. Laura set her basket on the counter, then leaned in to kiss my cheek. "I thought you two might like something to nibble." Ava's lips curved in a genuine smile for the first time. "Thanks, Mom." Laura joined us at the table, and the 3 of us fell into easy conversation, talking about the kids' upcoming school play, Aunt Margaret's new puppy, and the miracle of spring flowers. I watched Ava and Laura exchange supportive glances, their shared strength buoying me. Later, as I washed the dishes, Ava lingered behind me. "Dad, can I talk to you outside?" she asked. We stepped onto the deck, sunlight filtering through the maple leaves. The backyard felt peaceful, our sanctuary since the snake incident. Ava folded her arms, frustration flickering. "David called this morning," she said. "He's furious that I'm involving you instead of him." I leaned against the railing. "Does he realize what happened?" She shook her head. "He thinks I embarrassed him by letting you handle things. He said I made him look weak." Her voice cracked. "I don't want to choose between you and him." My chest tightened. "You shouldn't have to choose. Somewhere along the way, David needs to see that partnership means asking for help." Ava bit her lip, tears shimmering. How do I make him understand? He's already threatening to pull a lawyer on me if I try to change our joint accounts. I held her gaze. Let me talk to Margaret with you. A neutral party can explain the benefits of transparency and budgeting. She nodded gratefully. Okay. That afternoon we drove together to Margaret's office. Laura stayed home to prepare tacos for dinner, the only meal that ever felt like pure comfort. In the waiting room, I watched as anxiety creased Ava's brow. When Margaret greeted us with her trademark warm authority, Ava exhaled relief. They sat in Margaret's office for over an hour discussing spreadsheets, projected expenses, and a monthly review system. I stood by the bookshelf paging through a legal journal, but listening for every moment of Ava's soft chuckles when a budgeting chart finally clicked for her. When we emerged, Ava's shoulders were straighter, her expression lighter. I have a plan, she said, handing me printed copies of a new budget. We'll meet every 2 weeks, and David agreed to try counseling on money issues. My heart soared. That's fantastic. I enveloped her in a hug. The drive home was quiet but comfortable, the initial tension replaced by cautious optimism. When we pulled into the driveway, Laura was waiting, arms open with a plate of warm tacos and a big smile. We all sat down together on the patio, eating and chatting as the sun set. I caught Ava's eye across the table and saw gratitude and determination shining there. We had weathered storms I never imagined, and still here we were, a family healing. Later that night, after the kids were tucked in and the house hushed, I found Ava in the living room hunched over a spreadsheet on her laptop. Papers were strewn across the coffee table, receipts, bank statements, and color-coded notes. "You still at it?" I teased softly. She looked up, rubbing her eyes. "I want to get this right." I sat beside her. "You will." Her gaze met mine with fierce resolve. "I'm going to prove I can handle my money and that you can trust me with more than just emergencies." I nodded, pride swelling. "I know you can." She closed the laptop and leaned into me. "Thank you for believing in me." I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Always." In the deep quiet that followed, I reflected on how far we'd come since that fateful box arrived. Trust once broken took time to rebuild, one conversation, one budget review, one moment of honesty at a time. But as I sat there with my daughter resting against me, I felt the fragile but undeniable strength of our bond returning. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but I was ready to stand by her to support her and to remind her that family meant facing struggles together. And as I turned off the lamp and headed to bed, I smiled, knowing that this time, when I woke, our family would be stronger than ever. That Monday morning, I woke to the scent of rain on the pavement and the gentle hiss of the shower running next door. Laura and I shared a quick glance over our coffee mugs before she kissed my cheek and slipped out to water the garden. The house felt calm, almost peaceful, a lull I knew we didn't deserve but desperately needed. I spent the first half hour poring over Ava's new budget spreadsheet. She'd color-coded every line: rent, utilities, groceries, the occasional fun money category. It looked solid, but reality had a way of testing even the best plans. I heard her footsteps on the hardwood and looked up. "Dad, can we go for a walk?" she asked, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The worry in her eyes told me it wasn't casual. "Of course," I said, grabbing my raincoat. We stepped into a soft drizzle and headed toward the old oak by our mailbox, the same tree where I'd carved Ava's initials 40 years ago. She exhaled, watching raindrops trace patterns on the sidewalk. "David and I argued last night," she admitted. "He thinks I'm too dependent on you. He says we're just postponing the inevitable." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I saw her shoulders slump under its weight. My heart tightened. "How did you respond?" She shook her head. I tried to explain the budget, that we're both involved, that I'm taking the lead, and he agreed to counseling. But he accused me of going behind his back. Her eyes glistened. I don't know how to make him see this is about teamwork, not control. I reached out, touching her arm. Sometimes people resent what they can't control. He's used to steering the ship. Now you're co-captain. I managed a small smile. That's good. It should be that way. She managed a sad smile in response. If he'd just show up to one of our meetings with Margaret, maybe he'd understand. I nodded. Then let's invite him again together. And this time, I'll be there to support both of you. Her relief was palpable. I'd like that. She looked up at the oak's thick branches. Remember when I told you I wanted to run away and join the circus? She asked softly. I laughed. You nearly did after your 8th birthday party fiasco. You covered half the backyard in cake frosting and declared yourself a world-famous trapeze artist. She joined my laughter, then sighed. I felt brave back then. Her expression turned wistful. Now I just feel scared. I squeezed her arm. It takes bravery to face your problems head on. You've done that. By evening, we'd arranged a joint session with Margaret for Thursday. Laura insisted on making salmon and asparagus for dinner, a meal light enough to soothe frayed nerves. Over the table, we talked about the kids' school projects and next weekend's family barbecue. For a moment, it felt like old times. But when David arrived late, glancing at his phone, his tension filled the room. He skirted around greetings and took a seat at the far end. His posture was rigid, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Margaret guided the meeting with her customary warmth, inviting David to share his concerns. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. I just don't get why we need Dad in our finances. It's our responsibility. His voice was tight with frustration. I kept my tone calm. David, this isn't about Dad controlling us. It's about having a third perspective, someone who loves both of us and wants to see us succeed. David's gaze flicked to me, then to Ava. I feel like I'm being sidelined, like I can't prove myself. Ava reached out, touching his hand. You are not sidelined. I asked for help because I trust Dad, and I trust you. We're in this together. David hesitated, then exhaled. Okay, he said, voice quieter. I'll try. He glanced at me, vulnerability flashing in his eyes. I'm sorry for snapping. I nodded. Thank you. I felt a surge of hope. This was the breakthrough we'd been waiting for. Over the next 2 days, our home shifted back toward normal joint budget meetings, shared chores, laughter in the kitchen. I watched as David and Ava collaborated on meal plans and car maintenance, their teamwork growing stronger. Late Wednesday, I received an email alert. Ava's rent payment had bounced. My stomach tightened. I called her immediately. Ava, your rent didn't go through, I said, trying to keep panic out of my voice. Her silence stretched. I forgot to update the new routing number, she admitted. I'm so sorry. I exhaled in relief. It's okay. Let's fix it now. I guided her through the banking portal and she confirmed the transfer. Everything's set, she said. Don't beat yourself up, I said warmly. We all make mistakes. She laughed, relief coloring her tone. Thanks, Dad. Thursday arrived clear and bright. Our joint session with Margaret felt celebratory rather than fraught. David admitted his fears about his own financial insecurities, and Ava acknowledged her tendency to push him aside when she panicked. They agreed on transparent communication, bi-weekly check-ins, shared spreadsheets, and a rule to discuss any irregular expenses first. When the meeting ended, David stood and offered me a hand. Thank you for your patience, he said. His handshake was firm, sincere. I smiled broadly. We're family. We do this together. Back home, we shared a celebratory dinner barbecue, chicken and corn on the cob. The kids ran around the yard chasing fireflies, their laughter drifting through the open windows. I sat between Laura and Ava watching David flip burgers on the grill. The glow of the porch light cast warm shadows over our faces. At one point, David approached me. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Thomas," he said softly, "thanks for sticking with us." I looked into his eyes, seeing respect and gratitude. "Thank you for trusting me." As we settled around the table, plates piled high, I felt a swell of emotion. This family I'd nearly lost to anger and fear was healing stronger and more united than before. The night air carried the scent of summer, and the flicker of fireflies felt like little sparks of hope. Later, after the kids were asleep and the kitchen was calm, I sat on the back steps with Laura. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "We did it," she whispered. I kissed her hair. "Yeah, we did." Behind us, the old oak stood sentinel, its branches rustling in the night breeze, witness to our battles, our heartbreak, and now our triumph. And as I closed my eyes, I knew that whatever storms tomorrow might bring, we would weather them together, rooted in love, guided by trust, and ready for whatever came next. That Saturday morning felt different. Warm spring sunshine spilling through the curtains, birdsong drifting in like an invitation. I lay in bed a moment longer than usual, listening to the distant laughter of Mia and Noah playing in the backyard. When I finally rolled upright, I felt a curious mix of contentment and anticipation. After everything we'd been through, I realized how precious normal mornings were. Downstairs, Laura was at the stove flipping pancakes. She looked up and offered me a plate stacked high, syrup glistening like amber. "Good morning," she said, her eyes sparkling. Family breakfast on the deck. I inhaled the sweet scent and nodded, sliding my plate onto the table. Sounds perfect. Outside, the screen door banged softly as the kids tumbled out squealing at the promise of pancakes and sunshine. Ava and David followed, hands full of folding chairs. They exchanged a grateful glance with Laura and me before settling at the picnic table. For a moment, we simply ate together, forkfuls of fluffy batter, punctuated by easy smiles and a few gentle teasing comments about David's syrup hair mishaps. After breakfast, we cleared the table and the kids raced off to chase butterflies among the flower beds. I washed dishes inside while Laura gathered up plates on the deck. The afternoon was ours, unhurried and warm. Ava approached me, her expression thoughtful. "Dad," she began as I rinsed a plate, "Mom mentioned you wanted to take us all down to my grandmother's birthday next month. Are we still on for that?" I rinsed again and turned to face her. "Absolutely. She's turning 60, right? We should make a weekend of it." Her smile was bright but tinged with concern. "I'm a little nervous about the cost. We're already tight with rent and the savings plan." I set the dish in the rack and wiped my hands. "Let's look at the numbers together tonight. We'll figure it out." I touched her shoulder gently. "Family trips are important." She nodded, relieved. "Thanks, Dad." She slipped away and I finished up, heart swelling with pride at how careful she'd become with money. The rest of the afternoon drifted by in lazy comfort. Laura and I weeded the herb garden while Ava and David supervised, offering pointers and joking about our eccentric lavender shapes. The kids scribbled chalk drawings on the driveway under our watchful eyes. It felt like a scene from a magazine, spread idyllic, sunlit, untroubled. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Ava and I spread her grandmother's invitation on the coffee table. She had highlighted key details, the location, the hotel dinner reservations. Together with David, we pulled up our joint budget spreadsheet and created a new line item, Grandma's 60th trip. We estimated gas, hotel dinner, and a surprise gift. As we typed numbers in colored cells, our conversation flowed naturally. Maybe we could carpool with Aunt Margaret, and Uncle Bill David suggested. They live 2 hours south. Ava's eyes lit up. Great idea that cuts our gas in half, and I found a discount code for the hotel, she added. If we book tonight, we can save $50. I leaned in to review the numbers. Looks like we can do this and still stay under our monthly limit. Ava threw her arms around David. Teamwork, she whispered with a grin. I closed the laptop, feeling the familiar warmth of accomplishment. All right, team family trip is on. But just as I reached for my coffee, my phone buzzed with an alert and overdraft fee. My heart lurched. I pulled up our checking account. Sure enough, a recent payment to the dentist for Mia's orthodontic consult had triggered a $35 overdraft. The new budget line for Grandma's trip hadn't accounted for that expense. My chest tightened as I stared at the red numbers. Before I could speak, Ava caught sight of my screen. "Dad," she asked, concern dawning in her voice. I forced a calm smile. "We have a small hiccup." I explained the fee and how it nudged us over our planned spending. Her face fell. "God, I'm sorry. I forgot about that appointment." David placed a hand on her back. "It's okay. We'll fix it." I nodded. "We will. We can shift a few dollars from dining out and make it up in other areas. It's manageable." Ava exhaled a shaky breath. "Thanks for not freaking out." I pulled her into a hug. "We're in this together. Mistakes happen." That night I lay awake thinking about the little overdraft. It was minor, but I sensed the tension lingering like a storm cloud. By morning I realized we needed to turn this into another teachable moment, proof that real life tests even the best plans, but good communication and flexibility could steer us back on course. Over pancakes once more, I broached the subject. "So, last night's hiccup, let's talk about how we handle unexpected expenses." Ava nodded, eyes earnest. "I was already planning to add a small emergency fund line, say $50 a month. That way, little surprises won't blow our budget." I beamed at her. "That's a smart idea." I turned to David. "How do you feel about that?" David grinned. "I'm in. I'll make the spreadsheet change." We spent our Sunday morning adjusting the budget, adding emergency cushion trimming, fun money by a few dollars, and keeping Grandma's trip firmly on the calendar. When we finished, we high-fived around the table, a small ritual that had become our family's way of celebrating victories big and small. Later that afternoon, I took a walk with Laura through the neighborhood. We passed flowering dogwoods and kids on bicycles, the world alive with color and possibility. She slipped her hand into mine. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah. It's amazing how even small bumps can feel big when you care so much." She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. "But we handled it, and our kids saw how we do that together." I kissed her temple. "Exactly." That evening, as I tucked Mia and Noah into bed, they whispered about Grandma's party and what outfits they'd wear. Their excitement was contagious, and as I closed their bedroom door, I felt a swell of hope. We had come so far from a box that threatened our family to late-night spreadsheets and budgeting lessons, and now, with a cushion against the unexpected and a plan for the future, we were ready for more than just reconciliation. We were ready to thrive. Back in the living room, I found Ava sprawled on the couch, reading a novel. She looked up as I sat beside her. "Thanks for planning the trip," she said softly. I wrapped an arm around her. "Thank you for trusting me." She leaned into me, and for a moment I closed my eyes, savoring the steady warmth of family. The road ahead would have its twists and turns, unexpected fees, personal struggles, storms we couldn't foresee, but tonight we had proved that our bond was stronger than any hiccup. And as I flicked off the lamp and we headed upstairs, I knew we would face whatever came next together as a family. The morning after our successful budget tweak, I woke to the familiar patter of rain against the window pane. I stretched and glanced at the clock, 7:15 a.m., precisely when Mia and Noah would come tumbling down the stairs. I padded into the kitchen where Laura was already brewing coffee, droplets of water still clinging to her hair from the garden. "Morning," I said, slipping beside her as she handed me a mug. The steam warmed my face, but my mind was already racing ahead to the weekend road trip for Grandma's 60th. "You look pensive," Laura observed, tilting her head. "I'm thinking about packing," I admitted, wrapping my hands around the mug. "Car space, luggage, snacks, all of it." She laughed softly. "First world budgeting problems." I smiled, but beneath the humor was the flicker of anxiety. This trip was our first real test of teamwork on the road. We'd survived the snake package, rebuilt trust, even tackled an overdraft. Could we now navigate 5 hours of highway together without financial or personal drama? By 8:00 a.m., the kids bounded in eager for breakfast. As I flipped pancakes, they jabbered about choosing seats, window or aisle, and who would get Grandma's avocado toast. Their excitement was infectious, and I realized that this trip would be more than a family reunion. It would be a symbol of how far we'd come. At 9:30, Ava and David arrived with suitcases lined up like soldiers on the porch. David raised an eyebrow at my pancake flipping technique. "You make these every weekend?" "Only when the power of syrup is required," I teased. He grinned relief, softening his features. After loading the car, carefully tucking in coolers, pillows, and emergency snacks, we climbed inside. The back seat chatter was lively, Mia and Noah trading jokes, Ava reminding them to buckle up, David navigating the GPS. As we pulled away, I caught Laura's eye in the rearview mirror. She gave me a small, encouraging nod. I took a deep breath, hands steady on the wheel. The highway stretched out like a ribbon ahead, and for the first time in weeks, I felt calm. The drive began smoothly, light rain, easy traffic. We played everyone's favorite road trip playlist, lo-fi covers of classic rock, and sang along at the top of our lungs. When hunger pangs struck, we pulled into a roadside cafe, splitting the check evenly without fuss. It was a small victory of our new budget. We'd allotted $30 for pit stop meals, and the total came in under that. I caught Ava's eye and smiled. She mouthed, "We did it." Back on the road, the conversation drifted from school projects to weekend plans. Then out of nowhere, the car shuddered and the check engine light flickered on. My heart clenched. "Dad, what's wrong?" Ava asked, concern edging her voice. I eased onto the shoulder and killed the engine. "Not sure," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Let's pop the hood." David jumped out and hefted the hood release. Within moments, he and I were examining the engine bay in the drizzle. A slick of oil pooled beneath the car. "It's leaking," he muttered. My stomach dropped. We were 2 hours from a town big enough to have a mechanic, and even if we reached one who knew how much the repair would cost, I felt the old panic rising, threatening to unravel everything. "Okay," I said, exhaling slowly. "Let's call AAA." Ava dialed, then recited the membership number. "They say it'll be an hour for a tow. 1 hour." Our 2-hour buffer to Grandma's party had shrunk to near impossible. I swallowed hard, then turned to the family. "All right, we have 2 options. Wait here in the rain for help, or we can call a local mechanic and see if they can meet us sooner." "Can you look up a garage?" David offered. I nodded, pulling out my phone. Ava scrolled through search results and found a family-owned service station 5 miles up the road. I dialed the number and explained our situation. The mechanic, a gravelly-voiced man named Ron, said he'd meet us at the cafe parking lot in 20 minutes with a tow truck. Relief washed through me. "Thank you," I said, ending the call. The group settled into the cafe's covered bench. The kids fidgeted umbrellas dripping at their sides. Laura wrapped her arms around me. "We'll get there," she whispered. I nodded, pressing a grateful kiss to her temple. "Yeah, together." True to his word, Ron pulled up in a cherry-red tow truck just after 20 minutes. He winced at the oil stain and muttered about a cracked gasket. "I can have you towed and fixed in town, but it'll be at least 2 hours before I can start." I pressed my jaw tight. 2 hours plus tow time meant we'd miss Grandma's party entirely. Tears pricked my eyes as I pictured her disappointed face. "Is there a way to get there without the car?" I asked, voice tight. He shrugged. "There's a bus to the county seat, but that won't help unless you leave the car and get it repaired later." David exchanged a glance with Ava. Tension flickered between them. Then she took a deep breath, holding back tears. "Dad, just go. You and Mom. The kids and I can stay here, take the bus, and meet you at the hotel." Her offer was kind, but the thought of splitting the family tugged at me. "Are you sure?" I asked gently. She nodded fiercely. "We'll be okay. I'll handle the bus fare." She turned to the children. "Come on, guys. Adventure time." Noah threw an arm around her waist. "Yeah, Mom, we got this." I felt my throat tighten with pride and heartbreak. Laura squeezed my hand. "Pack your things and go," she urged quietly. "We'll get a rental car later." I swallowed and hugged Ava close. "Thank you for your strength." She brushed a raindrop from my cheek. "We're stronger than a broken car." Within minutes we had our bags and boarded the Yellow County bus. The driver, a kindly older woman, waved as we climbed aboard, kids in tow. I slipped a 20 into her hand. "Thank you." The bus pulled away, its red brake lights glowing in the drizzle. I watched them disappear down the road before turning back to Laura. We followed the tow truck to the mechanic's garage, dropping off our car with a promise to return. Back at the cafe parking lot, we retrieved our rental car. The clerk apologized for the weather and handed over the keys with a sympathetic smile. "Family trips are full of surprises," he said, as if he'd heard every version of our story. Laura slipped into the driver's seat while I buckled us in. "Next stop, Grandma's hotel," she said, starting the ignition. The rain had eased to a mist, and as we drove away, I looked back at our disabled car, then ahead at the open highway. In that moment, I realized every family faces breakdowns, literal and emotional. It's not the obstacle that defines us, but our response. We'd chosen adaptability over despair, unity over division. As the hotel's neon sign came into view, I felt a surge of gratitude. We'd made it, albeit via detour, and more importantly, we'd proven that our family bond could withstand anything: betrayal, budgeting crises, runaway snakes, and even a busted gasket. Laura reached over and squeezed my hand. "We did it," she said softly. I nodded, tears of relief stinging my eyes. We did. Together we rolled past the valet stand, two imperfect but unbreakable hearts, carrying a family ready to celebrate the love and resilience that had brought us through every storm. That evening, as we checked into the hotel lobby, drenched from our detour, I felt adrenaline and relief crash through me in equal measure. The neon glow of the sign, reflected in the marble floor, while the clerk handed us room keys with a sympathetic smile. "Welcome," he said. "I hope the rest of your weekend is smooth." As we turned toward the elevators, I caught Laura's eye. We shared a grin that spoke volumes against all odds we'd made it. The elevator ride was quiet, save for the soft ding announcing our floor. The hallway lights cast long, warm pools on the carpet, and I led our little caravan kids, clutching stuffed animal suitcases in tow, to room 412. I slid the key card and heard the lock click open. Inside, the room felt cozy, twin beds pushed together, windows overlooking a courtyard fountain, the faint scent of lavender from the hotel's seasonal diffuser. I set the suitcases down and turned to Ava. "Thank you," I said, voice thick with emotion. "For being flexible, for leading the kids on that bus, for trusting us." She offered a small smile, exhaustion and pride mingling on her face. "Family first," she whispered. David collapsed onto one of the beds with a dramatic sigh. "Next time we pick a car that holds all four of us," he joked, easing the tension. Mia and Noah raced to the window, pressing their noses against the glass. "Look, Grandpa," Mia cried, pointing at a small gathering forming by the fountain. I peered out, relatives in pastel shirts and sundresses, balloons tied to benches, a banner reading, "Happy 60th, Grandma Rose." My heart swelled. "That's her," I said, ushering everyone toward the door. We descended the stairs, laughter and footsteps echoing as we hurried to join the celebration. The courtyard was alive with chatter and sunshine. Grandma Rose, standing beneath the banner, wore a bright coral dress and a crown of daisies in her silver hair. When she saw us, her face lit up like sunrise. She hurried forward, arms open. "Thomas, Laura." "My brave explorers," she exclaimed, enveloping us in a tight hug. Her joy was a balm, healing every scar from the past weeks. I steered her gaze to the kids. "Here they are. Grandma." Emma, Mia, leaped into her arms, and Noah piled on top, squealing with delight. Laura and I watched from the side as Rose's laughter tinkled like bells. Ava approached, her eyes shining. "Happy birthday, Mom." She slipped a small box into Grandma's hand. Rose shook it gently. "Open it," she coaxed. Inside was a framed photo of the family from last Christmas, everyone smiling around the fireplace. Grandma's eyes brimmed. "Oh, you beautiful people," she whispered, pressing the frame to her heart. A hush fell as David cleared his throat gently. "I have a toast." He pulled a flute of sparkling cider from a nearby table. "To Grandma Rose, our anchor, our sunshine, and the one who taught us the meaning of family. May your 60th year be filled with laughter, love, and adventures." He flicked his glass toward me and Laura, then to Ava and the kids. "Cheers." Glasses clinked, the pop of corks blended with happy chatter. I took a sip, the crisp sweetness tasting like hope reborn. I glanced at my daughter. She caught my eye and nodded a silent apology and a promise woven between us. After the toast, the party flowed. Kids chased interactive robots in the lobby. Relatives shared stories of Rose's youth. And I found myself deep in conversation with Uncle Bill about tackling unexpected troubles, car breakdowns, budget hiccups, and all. We laughed about our own misadventures on road trips long ago, the way grandparents do, with eyes full of memories. Later, when the sun dipped low and lanterns were lit around the fountain, Rose beckoned me aside. We stood beneath a string of fairy lights, the air fragrant with jasmine. "Thomas," she said softly, "I know there's been tension with Ava." Her gaze was gentle but knowing. But you've done right by her. Love sometimes means letting go, and sometimes bringing people home. She touched my arm. I'm proud of you both. I swallowed, overwhelmed. Thank you, I whispered. Your strength reminds us what really matters. She squeezed my hand. Now go celebrate. Dance with Laura. Laugh with your family. You've earned it. I nodded and turned to find Laura waiting, necklace of warm light around her shoulders. I offered my hand and she took it without hesitation. Under the lantern glow we swayed to soft jazz, drifting from the bandstand. Her head rested on my chest, and I felt her heart beating in time with mine, a steady drumbeat that promised new beginnings. Across the courtyard I saw Ava dancing barefoot with Mia and Noah, their laughter bright as fireworks. David clapped along, finally relaxed. My chest filled with gratitude. We had weathered storms, betrayals, snake scares, broken gaskets, and emerged stronger, bound together by choice and trust. As the band played the last notes and the crowd began to thin, I walked back to the table where Grandma Rose sat with a slice of cake. She caught my eye and gave a little nod. I nodded back in return, a silent agreement that our journey was far from over, but that tonight we celebrated the love that would carry us forward. Later, tucked into bed in room 412, I lay awake for a while, listening to the distant hum of late-night guests. I thought about the path that had led us here, one fraught with conflict, fear, and the slow rebuilding of trust. I thought about my daughter's growth, my wife's unwavering support, and the stubborn spark of hope that refused to die. Finally, I closed my eyes, breathing in the soft hush of the hotel. Tomorrow would bring packing checkout and the long drive home. But for now, I drifted into sleep with a heart unburdened, safe in the knowledge that family once fractured could be remade stronger than ever, one shared step at a time. The morning light in our hotel room was softer than I'd expected, filtering through sheer curtains and painting the carpet in warm golden hues. I stretched and felt the pleasant ache of muscle fatigue from yesterday's dancing and laughter. Laura stirred beside me, her arm draped across my chest. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Good morning," careful not to wake the children sleeping soundly in the next bed. Downstairs in the lobby, we retrieved our rental car and headed straight for the mechanic's shop. The sky was clear now, the spring rain washed away. I felt a twinge of relief as Ron, the mechanic, waved us over, giving the car a thumbs up. "You've got a new gasket and a fresh oil change," he said. "Shouldn't give you any more trouble." I handed him the payment we'd set aside, then climbed back into the driver's seat with Laura. As we merged onto the highway, the kids' excited chatter about Grandma Rose's party echoed from the back seat. Mia and Noah waved their thank you cards out the window, the ones they'd made for Rose. Their joy was a reminder that our family's healing was real and still unfolding. I glanced at Laura in the passenger seat. She returned my smile with bright eyes, and I felt a swell of gratitude. We were on our way home, but this trip had become so much more a testament to resilience, forgiveness, and togetherness. The drive home passed in comfortable silence, punctuated by soft conversation about planting new flowers in our garden and planning a backyard barbecue later that week. When we pulled into our driveway just past noon, the scent of fresh-cut grass and blooming jasmine greeted us like an embrace. Our home looked the same, yet everything had changed. Inside, our phones buzzed with voicemails and texts, friends wanting to hear about the party, Aunt Margaret asking if we needed anything, even the neighbor Mrs. Patel checking in. I unlocked the door, and Laura stepped in first, carrying a grocery bag filled with snacks, our tradition after a long trip. The kids bounded ahead, exclaiming over their sleeping bags and the comfort of their own beds. Ava and David followed, somewhat quieter than the children, but smiling nevertheless. She paused in the hallway, eyes scanning the familiar walls, theirs too, in part. I walked up behind her and draped an arm around her shoulders. "Welcome home," I said softly. She leaned into me, exhaling. "It's good to be back." Her voice held more than relief. There was a new sense of belonging. Over turkey sandwiches and lemonade we shared highlights. The toasty courtyard. Grandma's dance moves, Ron's tow truck heroics. Friendship and forgiveness colored our conversation. David confessed he'd fielded phone calls from his company mid-trip, but realized family came first. He'd forwarded the calls to voicemail. "Best decision of my life," he admitted, raising his glass of lemonade in a mock toast. Ava laughed, her blue eyes sparkling with affection. "See what happens when we prioritize love over emergencies," she teased him gently. "We actually get to enjoy our lives." David reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You're right." He turned to me. "And Dad, I want to thank you again for stepping in when I couldn't." I felt my throat tighten. It was my honor. Later that afternoon, I found myself in the living room surrounded by photo albums from the trip. Laura and I sat on the sofa, flipping through snapshots of the party, Grandma Rose's radiant smile as the family gathered, the children chasing fireflies in the courtyard, David and Ava dancing barefoot under lantern light. Each image held a story of reconciliation and hope. "I've never seen Grandma so happy," I said, tracing my finger over a photo of her hugging Mia. Laura nodded. "You gave her a gift, family unity." I closed the album and turned to her. She gave us one too, reminding us what really matters. As we spoke, Ava appeared in the doorway. She held 2 steaming mugs of hot cocoa, the spoons still swirling in marshmallows. "For you too," she said softly. "Thanks for everything." I took the mug with a grateful smile. The warmth seeped into my hands. "Thank you, sweetheart." She sat beside us on the arm of the sofa. "I wanted to talk about next month, our anniversary." She held my gaze. "I know I haven't been the daughter you deserved, but I want to make amends, starting there." I felt tears prick my eyes. I was 35 years older, yet my daughter's growth filled me with such pride. "What are you thinking?" She exhaled, courage in her tone. "Let me plan something for you and Mom, just the 2 of you. No emergencies, no detours, just a celebration of you." I blinked away emotion. "That would be wonderful." Laura squeezed my hand. "I'd love that." Across the room, the children tumbled in giggles, playing with the grandchildren's puzzles we'd bought Rose as a party gift. The sound of their laughter wrapped around us like a promise. That evening, our family gathered on the patio for an impromptu barbecue. We grilled burgers and hot dogs, sipped iced tea, and recalled our misadventures, the snake, the tow truck, the bus ride, the dance under the lanterns. Every story wove into the next laughter, echoing into the darkening sky. The air was balmy, the fireflies flickering like stars come low. At the end of the night, I stood with Laura by the railing, watching Ava and David tuck the kids into bed. I rested my head on her shoulder. "We did it," I said softly. She nodded, resting her head against mine. "We did." I thought of our journey from the first terrible shock of that box to this gentle, hopeful night. The tension had been real, the dangers frightening. But what held us together was stronger love's true power to heal and transform. As the fireflies danced and the scent of jasmine drifted, I knew that whatever storms lay ahead, our family had found a new rhythm, one of empathy, boundaries, and shared strength. And as I closed my eyes against the night, I whispered a silent vow to protect this fragile, beautiful bond one day, one choice, one loving moment at a time. That Sunday morning, the sun rose over our neighborhood like a promise kept. I sat on the porch with my mug of coffee growing cold in my hand, watching sparrows flit among the morning glories. The air was crisp, carried a faint scent of honeysuckle, and the world felt ripe with possibility. Laura joined me, her bare feet slipping onto the wooden boards, a contented smile spreading across her face. Behind us, the backyard waited flowers, newly planted garden chairs, arranged just so ready to host a summer of laughter and peace. I took a slow sip of coffee and let the warmth seep into my bones. "Can you believe how far we've come?" I asked, voice low, as if speaking too loudly might disturb the fragile serenity. She leaned back, stretching her arms overhead. "It almost feels like a dream," she replied. "From that awful day with the box to now you and the kids rebuilding trust, learning to lean on each other." I nodded. My mind drifted back to that moment when breathing holes in a cardboard box had shattered our sense of safety. I remembered dialing 911 with trembling hands, the rush of police lights, and the slither of that corn snake as animal control extracted it. That betrayal by my own daughter had cut deep, but it forced us to draw lines, set boundaries, and ultimately rediscover the strength in vulnerability. Ava appeared at the back door, carrying 2 mugs of steaming cocoa, just like she had after the party weekend. "Thought you might like refills," she said, stepping onto the porch. Her smile was warm, unguarded. I stood to meet her, wrapping her in a hug. The ache of our past conflicts softened as I held her close. "Thank you," I whispered, "for these and for everything." She laughed softly against my shoulder. "I learned from the best," she said, pulling back to meet my eyes. They were filled with a mixture of pride and humility. "I never want to lose what we've rebuilt." My chest tightened with emotion. Me neither. We settled into our chairs, the 3 of us united by experience and hope. The children's laughter drifted from inside as they built a puzzle on the living room floor, one that featured a family tree naturally crooked but rooted in resilience. I listened to the soft click of puzzle pieces snapping into place, each one a reminder that our family was stronger for having weathered every storm. A gentle breeze stirred the wind chime hanging by the porch railing, tinkling like the beginning of a new chapter. "What's our next adventure?" Ava asked, tilting her head, stirring her cocoa thoughtfully. "Grandma Rose wants to plan a big family reunion next year. Maybe at the lake house she still has up north." I smiled at the memory of last summer's trip canoeing at dawn marshmallows by the bonfire, the echo of our laughter across the water. "I think that sounds perfect," I said. "But this time, let's add a bonfire storytelling night. No phones, just voices under the stars." Her eyes glowed. "I'll coordinate the menu, campfire stew, fresh bread s'mores, of course. And I'll handle the logistics." David's voice came from the doorway, and we turned to see him leaning casually with a travel mug in hand. He offered it to me, and I accepted gratefully. "I've already checked on the docks and booked the extra cabin," he added. "I know how much you love early morning fishing." I laughed, taking a sip of the hot chocolate instead. "I see you haven't lost your knack for surprises." David gave a modest shrug. "Just trying to be part of the team." He slipped onto the porch, joining us in those simple chairs, set for a century's worth of Sunday mornings. We sat in companionable silence, 3 generations of a family who had found forgiveness and built something new. Eventually, the kids tumbled out, dripping wet from a pool, splashing session wrapped in towels emblazoned with cartoon fish. They raced around us, skidding to a halt on the lawn, breathless with excitement. "Papa, can you help us fly the kite?" Mia pleaded, pointing to a bright red kite lying on the grass. I rose, stretching, and extended a hand to Laura. "Shall we?" I asked, smiling. She linked her arm through mine. "Absolutely." We walked down the yard together, Ava and David a step behind the children, bursting ahead with the kind of unbridled joy we thought we'd lost forever. I grabbed the kite's string, feeling its tug against the breeze. As it soared upward, painting the sky with streaks of scarlet, I felt the weight of those darker days lift entirely. "Look at it go, Dad!" Noah shouted, running backward as the wind carried the kite higher, its tail dancing like ribbons in a parade. I guided the kite skillfully, recalling long-ago moments flying a similar model with my father. "Hold tight," I called, laughter in my voice. "We'll take it all the way to the clouds." Ava crouched beside me, her gaze on the kite's ascent. "I never knew I could feel this free," she murmured. "Thank you for holding on, even when I almost broke us." Her words struck me with gentle power. "You held on too," I said, voice thick with feeling. We held on together. The afternoon sun slipped lower, gilding the horizon as we gathered around a picnic blanket for late sandwiches and fruit. Conversation flowed easily. Summer plans, a friend's upcoming wedding, David's latest work project. There were no threats now, no lurking fears, just the steady rhythm of ordinary life, punctuated by the extraordinary gift of second chances. As dusk approached, fireflies blinked into existence. We moved chairs to the patio and lit citronella candles, the soft glow illuminating contented faces. I leaned against Laura, her head on my shoulder, and watched the children chase the flickering lights. Somewhere in the distance, the neighborhood church bell chimed 6 o'clock. It sounded like an anthem for our family's journey, a call to keep going, to keep trusting, to keep loving. I closed my eyes against the gentle hum of nighttime settling in. "This is our new normal," I said quietly to Laura, "peaceful, resilient, bound together by choice." She nodded, eyes shining in the candlelight, and always ready for the next adventure. I looked across the table at Ava and David holding hands as they guided the kids in a game of tag. A swell of pride filled me, my daughter, once determined to sear away our ties with a snake, now lighting our nights with laughter and hope. I stood and raised my glass of lemonade in a silent toast. When I spoke, my voice carried across the hush of evening. To family imperfect, tested, and stronger than ever. Glasses clinked in the soft glow. The children squealed and the adults laughed, and for a shining moment, I believed that love truly was enough to carry us through everything. As I headed inside to tuck the kids into bed, I thought of tomorrow, of all the mundane tasks and joyful surprises awaiting the mail, the grocery run, the garden's first tomatoes. But more than that, I thought of the steady beat of this new chapter, everyday moments woven into a tapestry of healing. Later, as I crawled into bed beside Laura, I felt her hand in mine. "Good night, Dad," she whispered. "Good night, my love," I replied, pulling the covers up around us. The weight of a long journey seemed to lift entirely in those simple words. And as I drifted into sleep, I carried with me the promise that no matter what storms might darken our door again, we had learned to weather them together with open hearts and unwavering hope.